Today, we're talking about a man who many, and I mean many, consider the greatest chess player of all time, Bobby Fischer. He was this absolute force of nature, a true American icon who could have been, well, he could have been anything. But his story took a turn that nobody saw coming, and it transformed him from a celebrated hero into something else entirely.
And this, right here, is the shocking paradox at the very heart of his life. On one hand, you've got the hero, right? The lone American genius who single-handedly brought down the entire Soviet chess empire. But on the other hand, a wanted fugitive, a man who celebrated the 9/11 attacks and would eventually die in exile.
So that's the real question here, isn't it? How does one person become both of these things? How does a national treasure become a wanted man? How does a symbol of American brilliance become its sworn enemy? The story is just absolutely wild.
To even begin to understand the man, we've got to go back. Back to the beginning, to his incredible rise during one of the tensest times in modern history, the Cold War.
You've got to understand, back then, chess wasn't just a board game. For the Soviet Union, it was a political weapon. It was proof of their intellectual superiority on the world stage. They had this thing called the Soviet chess machine, basically a state-funded factory for producing world champion after world champion. They owned the game, and losing was just not an option for them.
And then, out of nowhere, comes this kid, Bobby Fischer. He finds chess at age 6. By 9, it's not a hobby. It's a total obsession. He literally ate, slept, and breathed the game. This singular, almost manic focus, it paid off. By 13, he's holding his own against the best players in America. And at just 14 years old, he becomes the U.S. champion. I mean, it was a rise nobody had ever seen before.
By 1971, Fischer wasn't just the best player in the world. He was in a totally different league. Just look at this. His player rating, which is kind of like a power level for chess players, just skyrocketed so far above all his rivals. A gap that big between number 1 and number 2, it had never happened before in the history of chess. It was insane.
20. That's the number. In 1971, on his way to the championship, Fischer won 20 straight games against the world's absolute best players, all of them Grandmasters. Now, you have to understand, at that elite level, most games end in a draw. It's just too hard to win. So winning 20 in a row, it wasn't just unheard of. It was considered basically impossible. It's a record that chess experts to this day just shake their heads at.
So this incredible winning streak sets the stage for the ultimate showdown. It's 1972, Reykjavik, Iceland, the World Championship. It's Fischer versus the Soviet champion Boris Spassky. It was way more than a chess match. It was America versus the USSR. The press called it the match of the century.
But here's where we start to see the other side of Bobby Fischer. The genius was there, but so was this incredibly difficult personality. He almost didn't even go. He started complaining that the prize money, which was the biggest in chess history, was an insult. He even trashed Iceland, saying the whole country wasn't good enough to host him. He was just so combative and demanding.
Seriously, getting him to the board was practically a global incident. A British millionaire had to personally double the prize money. The U.S. Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, had to get on the phone with him and pretty much beg him to play for his country. And when he finally did land in Iceland, he literally sprinted through the airport to get away from the reporters.
And when the match finally starts, it's a complete train wreck. Game 1, Fischer is in a totally drawn position, and he makes this shocking amateur-level mistake and just loses. Then he starts complaining the TV cameras are too loud and demands they all be removed. The organizers say no, so Fischer just doesn't show up for Game 2. He forfeits it.
Just like that, Fischer is down 2 games to none. In a world championship match, a hole like that is a death sentence. It's over. Nobody thought he could possibly come back. The Soviets were enraged, and it looked like the American prodigy was having a full-blown mental breakdown on the world stage.
And then, something really remarkable happened. Fischer demanded they move the entire match out of the main auditorium and into a tiny, windowless ping-pong room backstage with no cameras. An absolutely absurd request. But his opponent, Boris Spassky, in this incredible show of sportsmanship, said yes. He agreed. He didn't want to win because Fischer quit. He wanted to beat him over the board. And that decision,
It changed everything. Away from the crowds, away from the cameras, in that tiny, quiet room, Fischer became a monster. He played some of the most brilliant chess ever seen, demolished Spassky, and won the world championship. He did the impossible. He was on top of the world. And then, after reaching the absolute peak, the new champion did something even more shocking. He just disappeared.
After that incredible victory in '72, Fischer basically became a ghost. When it was time to defend his title 3 years later, he made this list of completely impossible demands. And when the organizers couldn't meet them, he just refused to play. So they stripped him of his crown. For the next 20 years, the greatest chess player on the planet didn't play a single public game.
And during these years of isolation, his behavior just got more and more erratic. He got involved with this fringe religious cult that was predicting the end of the world. He became totally convinced he was being spied on by both the KGB and the CIA, and he started publicly spewing these vile, anti-Semitic and anti-American rants, even though he himself was of Jewish heritage. He became a total recluse.
After 2 whole decades off the grid, Fischer finally popped back up. But it wasn't for some glorious comeback. No, this was the last tragic chapter of his life, the one where he made the moves that would turn him into a fugitive for good.
So, in 1992, he agrees to this $5 million rematch against his old rival Spassky. Sounds great, right? Well, here's the catch. The match was being held in Yugoslavia, which at the time was under severe international sanctions by the United States because of the war. It was strictly illegal for any American to do business there.
The U.S. government literally sent him a letter, warning him point blank, if you play this match, you face 10 years in prison. So what does he do? At the pre-match press conference in front of all the world's media, he holds up that official warning letter. He says this is his response to it.
And with that act of pure defiance, by playing that match and taking the money, Bobby Fischer, the American hero, well, he committed a federal crime. And a warrant was immediately issued for his arrest. Fischer won the rematch. He won the millions, but he could never go home. He was a fugitive. In 2004, he gets arrested in Japan for trying to use a revoked U.S. passport. He was about to be extradited back to the States to face prison. But then in the final, most unbelievable twist, he was saved by Iceland, the very country he'd insulted all those years ago, that granted him full citizenship and political asylum. His last years were spent giving these hateful, bitter radio interviews from Iceland. And on September 11, 2001, just hours after the towers fell, he went on a radio show to say he applauded the act. His words were just horrifying, and they completely cemented this image of a fallen, hate-filled man. Bobby Fischer lived out the rest of his life there, in Iceland, the place of his greatest triumph and his final refuge. He died from kidney failure in 2008. He was 64 years old. Which really just brings us back to this one profound, unsettling question. Fischer's mind could see things on a chessboard that nobody else could. It was a level of genius that was almost supernatural. But that same mind led him down a path of paranoia, hatred, and isolation. So you have to ask yourself, is extreme genius sometimes tied to madness? Is one the price you have to pay for the other? That's the tragic, unanswered question of Bobby Fischer.